So why is it so difficult to be happy? I mean, it's such a drag, isn't it, really? That's it, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's it? Okay. Well, Buddha would say because our minds are full of all these unhappy states of mind, which we completely identify with and assume are our natural state and gravitate towards like magnets, you know. And so we have to practice thinking differently. Really, it's a very simple way to say it, I think. We have to practice thinking differently. And that's the tough job. So I think if we look at, look at the West, the view in the West, when we think about what a person is, what makes up a person, then I think it's just, we think, well, a person has some anger and some jealousy and a bit of attachment and maybe strange things in the mind and all these fantasies and jealousy and depression and anxiety and stress. And then there's kind of kindness and love and generosity and patience. And we just say, well, that's what a person is, and we give all of those things equal value. We say, well, we're all born this way. It's just the way human beings are. And so then we plod along, since we're tiny kids, our mother try to teach us probably how to behave nicely. Don't, use your body and your speech in an inappropriate way if you're fortunate to have good parents. But the mind, most of us don't understand it. Our mothers get depressed and they get jealous and they get angry. So then the kids get born this way. They think, oh, well, we're all like this. And we don't get techniques. They don't give us techniques. We don't learn techniques in school. We learn how to read and write. And our mummy teaches us how to, tie our shoelaces and wipe our little bottoms and everything when we go to the toilet. But she doesn't teach us how to deal with our anger. She doesn't, because everyone has this assumption that this is just the way human beings are, what to do, Isn't it? I mean, don't we agree? And then as we go along, we kind of think we should become a better person, and we don't know why we get depressed so easily, and we are terrified of showing it, and we're supposed to put a happy smile on, And then we see the rest of the world, and it looks like all these crazy wars, and people killing each other, and divorcing each other, and suing each other, and beating each other up, and then we can deduce that other people are like this. So then again, we reinforce the view, oh, well, what to do, this is the way we all are, kind of get them all get depressed about that, and so it all goes on, right? So somehow, and then when we notice in our minds, we want to be kind, we want to be good, we want to, be generous, we want to be patient, but instinctively we just assume all this stuff is there, and then, we wonder why it is hard. We wonder why it is hard. When everything's going well, we can see, when things are going well, when we're getting what we want and everyone loves us and everything's working beautifully, then, then it's maybe sort of fairly easy not to be too angry, too jealous, too depressed. But even if things are going well, we still wake up one morning and we're kind of depressed and fearful and we don't know why, Well, I should be happy. Look, the lovely trees and we haven't got a war here and I've got good friends and a nice job and somehow it just is there, Well, somehow the Buddhist approach is interesting, First of all, the Buddha would say that actually the positive qualities are the ones that they're actually at the core of our being. And he would argue definitely with this instinctive view that we all seem to hold as a truth, that the negative stuff is kind of just there, it's just what to do. He would say, sure, it is there, absolutely. Look at the world, no one can argue. But what he's saying is that stuff, it is there very strongly, and even it seems almost like we would call more natural than the good. I mean, you look how easy it is to get upset, how easy it is to be jealous, to be depressed, to be stressed. So we can be forgiven for thinking that it seems to have more power than the good, Certainly in other people. Look at the world. I mean, the world is such a stressful place. But he would say, if we really look at this carefully, and that's what he would demand we do, don't just believe it, really look into the mind, and this is very much what a Buddhist is attempting to do, we're going to see that the positive qualities are actually at the core of our being, and that we've got this extraordinary potential to develop them. And I mean, that's an interesting concept, because I think it's not a view we tend to have. We know if we learn the piano and learn to drive and learn to make money, you can get better and better and better at it. We don't think of developing, we don't think of love and kindness and generosity and patience as something you can get better and better and better at. We tend to think we have a sort of a finite amount in here. You're just born that way. And some people are just born with lots of anger, and some are just born with lots of love, and it's just the way we are. We see it as very concrete, very static. I think so, you know. But the Buddha would see that, you know, just like a person who's a musician can look at a child and can see that that child's got this potential to become an amazing musician. They wouldn't just accept the potential, they wouldn't accept the bit of music that the child has developed at the age of 5 as the status quo. They would see, wow, you can really develop that. And then we can go off and we can find courses on how to develop it, can't we? You know, we're very good at all those things, like courses on music, we can see. But if you see your child has got some potential, let's say, to be very patient, you don't think, well, oh, let's find a course. You look up in the local university thing or the local kids thing, let's find a course, you know, how to really help this person become an incredibly patient person, or really loving, or extremely wise, or extremely joyful. We don't think like this. We just think that's just the way it is. There's a certain amount, and you kind of cross your fingers and hope that they'll get along in life, you know. And it's a bit like this, isn't it? Somehow we're very fatalistic about the way the mind is, about the person, about the characteristics, you know. But then it gets more complicated, because in the Western view, we see the person is born a certain way. There's certain kids, some kids are more patient, some are more angry, some are more jealous. But, and you know, and we get very fearful for the ones who are more angry and more jealous. But again, we don't think, well, let's find a course how to get less jealous and less angry, more patient and more rejoicing. We just kind of fearfully hope that they'll meet the right external conditions and the right people that'll help them get themselves together. But it's complicated by our you know, first of all, there's that fairly kind of passive view about what the mind is. But then, and then secondly, we don't think we can really develop it. But also, we're really convinced that, that we can sort of see that the person is like that, the child, right? But then we're fairly convinced that whether they continue to, whether they get happy in their life is dependent upon meeting the right conditions. Well, if they get a good job, if they get a nice wife, if they get a good bunch of kids, if they live in a nice place, you kind of hope as a parent that they'll find all those things, because then they'll get happy. But again, this is something Buddha would really argue with, you know. He's not saying you shouldn't have nice things, go for it. You know, get rich, get famous, get successful, have very happy houses and happy husbands and everything. There's nothing wrong. But what he is saying, this is, again, another point that he's making that's really central to the Buddhist approach to how to get happy, is that they're not the main things, you know. They're just not the main things. Whereas if you look at the way we are in our world, we definitely would put the external conditions, you know, the people, the jobs, the places, at the centre of the life, and pursue those as the source of happiness. But the Buddha would say, not in a moralistic sense, like I said, it's not as if he's saying you shouldn't have nice husbands and nice houses. He's not saying that. He's just simply saying, as like a technical point, not a big moralistic thing, that's great to have a nice house, it's great to have a good husband, you know, but they are not the main cause of your happiness. They won't, having those will help a little bit, but they're not, they won't actually, if you've got lots of anger, let's say, they won't help you get over your anger, which he says you can do. And they won't help you become more happy, which he says you can do. They won't help you become more loving, which he says you can do. So first of all, the Buddha would say, you know, that the stuff within you is yours. It doesn't come from your mum and dad. This is a big surprise to us, and that there's a whole discussion, you know, about karma, Buddha's whole view of where we come from and why we are the way we are. He would say, of course, your parents play a major role. You, as a parent, play a major role in how your child develops, but you're not the main thing. It's their own qualities, and we can see this. Some kids, we can see the kids. We look at our own children, and some are naturally more patient, some are naturally more angry. And you kind of think, oh, well, it must be the genes, it must be the DNA, you know. We say that, but the Buddhist view would be that that mind of that child is theirs. And what's in there is the thing that you should become very familiar with, because what's in there, by knowing what's in there, knowing their personality well, you can help them learn to take responsibility for that, to become very familiar with that, to really know themselves well. And then the crucial point is to know that they can, as Lama Zopa would put it, mould their mind. We can mould our mind into any shape we like. Because this is the heart job that Buddha would say we all need to do. Whether you want to go off and become a mother of 10 kids or live in an isolated life somewhere or become a multimillionaire, it doesn't matter. The main job is to develop your mind, develop your qualities, your personality, your positive qualities, and to lessen the negative ones. This, in Buddha's terms, first and foremost, is the method for getting happy. It's very simple. The words actually are so simple, it's embarrassing, you know. But because you look at what we think, finding happiness, as far as we're concerned in the ordinary world, is like finding a needle in a haystack. It's a really scary job, and we're not confident we're going to find it, you know. First we're convinced that we're just born that way, what to do. Then we don't have methods to help to look at the mind and develop it. And then we think it's all the happiness is out there, you know, and the suffering's out there. So we live in fear of meeting the suffering things, and we, you know, live in hope of finding the good things, hankering after it. So Buddha would say we all want happiness. That's cool, you know, it's perfect. But we have these, he would argue with our methods very clearly. He would say we're really mistaken in what we think happiness is, first of all, what we think suffering is, and then we're really mistaken in what we think the causes of happiness are and the causes of suffering are. This is how he'd talk. You know, because more than anything, Buddha is he's a therapist, he's a psychologist, I tell you. I mean, it sounds peculiar, because when we think religion and therapy, we think two completely separate things. But this really, if you strip away, I mean, you know, it is surprising, because you look at all this, you know, there's religious anywhere else you'll go, more religious. You're going to find more statues here than in your Catholic church, believe me. I mean, I was brought up a Catholic, right? The Buddhists leave the Catholics for dead when it comes to statues. I mean, look at this, you know. And holy pictures and everything. So if you take away all that stuff, I mean, it's got a purpose. All of this has a purpose, you know. But the purpose of all of it is the one thing, is to help a person develop their positive qualities. That's the bottom line of being a Buddhist. Which is a bit surprising, because when we think religion, we think somehow, we think of it about it becoming a better person, but we think it mainly in terms of faith and all this stuff, you know, prayers and faith and all blah, blah, blah. But in Buddhist terms, that's as much there as anywhere else, but the way to see it is that's a bunch of methods that you use, and you can choose to use or not, you're the boss, you know, not Buddha, to do the actual job, the main job. The job of being a spiritual practitioner in Buddhist terms is the job of working on your mind. That's it, you know. That's the job. That's the heart job of being a Buddhist. Learning to know yourself extremely well, learning to take responsibility for what is in there, and learning to know, and this is the crucial point, that you can develop the positive qualities, and we all know those words, love, kindness, patience, generosity, forgiveness, all this stuff, and learning to lessen the negative ones, and we all know those. Fear, anger, jealousy, resentment, the wish to lie, the wish to kill, so on and so forth. This is the simple job, you know. This is the job. Well, that's it. You can go home now. That's the essence of it, okay? So okay, the Buddhist view, why it is hard to be happy, is, from Buddhist point of view, is because we've got a bunch of mistaken ideas, the ones I've just said. First, we think happiness is coming from out there. Second, we think suffering comes from out there. Third, we think our mind comes from our mummy and daddy. We think it's physical. We think we're stuck with it. So Buddha would say, because we have these misconceptions, and he would say they're misconceptions, and don't just believe that. The Buddhist approach is learn to listen to what Buddha says about things and then think about it very carefully. You know, don't just blindly accept it, nor reject it for that matter. But he says, one of the simple reasons why we make a mess and why we you know, it is hard to be happy, because we have a misunderstanding about what happiness is, because we think it's out there, and the causes of it we think they're out there. So, you know, why is it hard to, you know, have pure water? Because you haven't identified the pollution yet. You keep thinking that's the pollution, but it's actually that, you know. So why is it hard to get pure water? Because you haven't identified correctly the cause of the pollution and the very nature of the pollution. Well, Buddha would say the same. We haven't identified carefully, accurately, the causes of suffering, which he would say to a huge extent is the unhappy states of mind. Very simple, you know. And the causes of happiness, which are the happy states of mind. The external world clearly plays a major role. As far as we're concerned in the world, that plays the main role, and that's the biggest mistake of all, you could say, we make. When I get that husband, then I'll get happy. When I get that new fridge, then I'll get happy. When I get thinner, I'll get happy, you know. When I live in a nice place, I'll get happy. When I change my job, I'll be happy. We're just totally addicted to this view. And it's the words are simple, but it's extremely hard to change that view. Because the whole world is structured, is based upon that assumption. Everybody's like that. Animals act like this. Everybody acts this way. And so it's like I said, it's easy words to say, but the job to do it is extremely difficult. It needs much thinking about, much clarity, and much, and if you like, convincing of ourselves from practice, you know. That the job of getting happy is essentially an internal one. The job of learning to lessen the suffering is an internal one. Now my feeling is in our own lives we can see the proof of this all the time, but we don't kind of notice it because we're so caught up in the belief that happiness is what I get when I get what I want. But we can see one day you wake up, you know, and it might be rainy, but your mind's quite content. You're not so depressed today. Oh, wow, you feel quite light, you know. Lousy day out there, but you feel quite content. Another day you wake up, sunny, beautiful, everything's perfect, you know, but you're anxious and worried and depressed. It's so obvious. We have these examples all the time in our own life. So that's proof. That is proof, actually, of this point that Buddha's making. It's really quite profound, but we don't kind of take the learning from it because we're so used to thinking, you know, this what Buddha would say is a mistake. That the main cause of happiness is out there. The main cause of suffering is out there. We're just addicted to that view. We're addicted to it, you know, even though our own experiences can prove to us the opposite. I mean, you know, we think living in a busy city, oh, that makes you fretful and stressed, you know. Living in the country, in the bush, as we say in Australia, that's cause of happiness. Well, I can remember from my own life one time when I was in this particular relationship, and it was like a nightmare. And then we were living, you know, idyllic life, naked in the bush, smoking dope and happy, and everything's perfect, you know. I was like in hell. My mind was in hell, you know. Another time, and I was living in New York City, berserk New York City, right? Because I was content. I felt really happy. Didn't matter, berserk city. That I was in the bush, dreadful. It's mental suffering, you know. I mean, we all have examples like this, and we ought to be blowing our minds when we see it, because it should prove to us, wow, you know. It's not true that living in the pure, naked, natural bush makes you happy, necessarily. It isn't true that living in New York City makes you stressed. Because if you have one example, one time in your life, that proves that your assumption is wrong. But because we're so addicted to that assumption, we don't actually notice it. We don't get the learning from it. So first of all, it's hard to get happy because we're addicted to Buddha would say, the mistaken view of what happiness is and what the causes are. Another way of talking about it is that, you know, if we do find it hard to be happy, it's because we have found it easy to be suffering. We've just practiced suffering more, that's all. There's nothing cosmic about it. There's no capital R reason. It's sort of like asking, why is it difficult for my plants to grow, you know, my flowers to grow? It's because you haven't nourished the flowers enough, because you've nourished the weeds enough. Or even if not so much you've nourished the weeds consciously, but you just let the status quo be, you know. Oh, well, look at the garden, the weeds are overgrowing, you know. You just let it be. That's why it's difficult for your plants to grow. But if you start, you know, pulling out the weeds and having confidence in the potential of the flowers to grow, then, you know, you'll change the habits. So one way Buddha talks about karma, you know, This word karma, it's Sanskrit, it means action, but it's really referring to this whole dynamic process that's pretty central to Buddha's view of the way things are. This process of cause and effect, you know. So we look at our minds in these terms. And if I look into my mind, you know, and we see we have a certain tendency to be angry, let's say. Well, you can, if the tendency, what's a tendency, you know? It's a habit, isn't it? It's a habit. If you're good at playing the piano, you know why you're good at playing the piano. It's because you've practiced it. It's your tendency. And you've practiced it. Why do you drive a car? Because you've practiced it. Why are you good at not driving a car? Because you haven't practiced. Because you haven't practiced driving. You've practiced non-driving, haven't you? You're really good at non-driving a car. It's because you've practiced not driving a car. It's sort of simple, isn't it? So how do you change that? Now, this is a good analogy. Right now, because the status quo is that you can't drive a car, you're thinking, oh, well, you're born this way, what to do, you know? Just can't drive a car. God, what to do, you know? Why is it hard to drive a car? Because you believe that your reality is non-driving a car. Because you're born this way, what to do? Can't help it, you know, what to do. Well, we all know you can go somewhere and get techniques and you can learn how to do it. Well, again, that's the point here. The status quo is maybe that since a kid you can see you have a tendency to be jealous or angry. Okay, let's even forget about the Buddhist explanation for why, which is due to continuity of consciousness and past lives and all this. Forget even this one, okay? Don't worry about even that one. But if you just look at yourself and you can look at, you take stock, okay, well, look, it looks like about 25% jealousy and 15% anger and, you know, I mean, or simply I have a tendency to be kind. Even if it's difficult, I can still be kind, you know. But I have a tendency to be lazy, or you can look at yourself, you can look at the present situation and you can assess your mind kind of, you know, fairly easily, can't you? I can't drive. I can cook pretty well. Not bad at the piano, really bad at mathematics. That's the status quo. Like, forget the past, right? That's the present. Now, we know, as I'm saying, with the various external pieces of knowledge, we can assess the situation, we can make the decision, would I like to learn more math, leave the cooking alone, perhaps I can learn more music, you know, so you can go off and find courses and learn them. Same about your mind. Just the same, no different. Take the same attitude. A bit depressed, rather jealous, fairly patient, quite generous, bit lazy, you know, you can assess yourself. And then you check up. Which would you prefer? Don't look at the outside world here. Look at yourself. Just like whether you can drive, whether you can, you know, play music. It's internal, isn't it? It's internal. Same here. We're talking about your inner qualities, your emotional qualities. So check it out. Which ones do you think you'd like to develop? Which ones inside you would you like to lessen? Everybody would be in agreement, I think. We don't say, oh, yeah, I was jealous yesterday and it was great. I mean, we know it is painful. We can all be in agreement in this room, pretty much, I think. Maybe we can argue a bit about anger when we tend to think it's good to be angry and it's our right and blah, 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 you know. But no one would agree that they want to be depressed, jealous, fearful, stressed, anxious. Do you understand? It's so simple. So check that out. You don't want to be those things. Now, of course, if you think your mummy made you this way, if you think it's just the way it is, and if you think the main causative is your husband, well, then you might think you mightn't want to be those things, but the main things that you'll think about is your wretched mother made you this way, and how dare your husband be this way. So you'll think about what you think are the causes, which are out there. That's the mistake. That's the mistake. Sure, your husband might be a creep. I understand, he might be. You understand my point? But the Buddhist point is, start looking in here, start taking stock of this, start taking responsibility. Not guilt, responsibility. We all know our thoughts and feelings to some extent, you know. So sure, life might be awful, the husband might be awful, the job might be lousy, you might have had a horrible mother. Yes, it might be true. Okay, forget that. Let's look in here, let's see what we can do. This is mine. What can I do with it? I mean, it sounds like simple words, doesn't it? Like, can I learn music? Let me learn to drive. Let me learn to do this. Let me learn how to make money. You go find a course. That's it. Well, that's the same with this, you know. Like I said, if you believe in the status quo of non-driving, and you think we're all born this way and what can I do, then, and there are no courses for doing it, then no wonder you're going to get miserable. I agree. Nothing you can do, you know. And that's unfortunately how we think about our mind, our emotions, our personality, our characteristics. So to start to have some confidence that yes, this is the status quo, this is how things are now, but hey, I can change. It's so simple to say these words. They're not rocket science, you know. But it's quite profound. So another reason it's hard to be happy is because we're addicted to the unhappiness, you know, which sounds kind of interesting, a bit sort of contradictory, because we all desperately want happiness, don't we? We're kind of locked into the patterns of being angry, being jealous, being stressed, being depressed. And because we think it's just innate, and because we don't have methods to change, then my goodness, you know, of course we're going to get even more depressed about it. But according to Buddha there are, you know, okay, that's what Buddhism is about. It gives a series of methods. How to know your mind. How to be clear, what's there. And then how to change. And it's nothing mystical. How do you change from being a non-driver to a driver? Okay, you learn the techniques, but essentially you start doing the opposite. So simple, you know. How do you learn to be not jealous? You start doing the opposite. How do you learn to be not angry? You start doing the opposite, you know. It's so simple. It's just hard, that's all. So in order to do this, we need to have a bit of understanding of just the characteristics of the unhappy states of mind, you know. So we say the word angry, we say the word jealous. I mean, let's just look at them. What do they mean, you know? Well, it's interesting that, you know, anger, for example, I mean, we all understand it in such different ways. All of these things, actually, when we call them emotions, you know. And again, this is the Buddhist explanation of why we're locked into these things, is because when we think thoughts, we point here. And these thoughts are rational, clear things, aren't they? But then we say emotion, it's down here, and it's kind of scary. We don't understand emotions. And we see them as completely separate parts of ourselves. But from Buddha's point of view, it's very interesting. From the Buddhist psychological point of view, there's this very strong relationship between thoughts and emotions. In fact, you know, if we look at something like anger, for example, when we think of a person who's very angry, we think of it as something volatile, don't we? You visualise the person crying, the shouting, you know, uncontrolled, the tears coming, the heart beating, the blood racing. We see it as emotion, and it's kind of scary. And we wouldn't think it has anything to do with thoughts. It sounds at least odd. But actually, if you take, you know, if you strip away the packaging, the emotional packaging, what you're coming down to, the bare bones of it, is a bunch of thoughts. And we can prove that quite easily. Let's say you tape yourself being angry. You tape someone else being angry. You just put a tape recorder on, and there they are having their shouting, you know, and emotion and dramas and all this. Then you tape it. And then you transcribe it, because it was words, wasn't it? It wasn't just tears, it was words coming out the mouth. So you transcribe them. And it's all quiet now, and the anger's, you know, the shouting is not happening anymore, and you've got pieces of paper with words written on it, haven't you? And you read those words. He is this, I hate him, how dare he does this to me, I will kill him, I am not what he thinks, I am a good... You understand my point? You can hear, and when you read those words, everybody who reads those words doesn't need to hear a shouting person to know that that's anger. So anger is a bunch of words. And that happens in the person's mind. So you could say, if you like, it's a story the person's saying, you know, about this person, what they did to them, how unfair it is, how you can't stand him, how you want to kill him. And you can hear hurt, can't you? You can hear so much hurt in anger, hurt. When you read the words, I, this painful sense of I am not like that. You did do that. You are so cruel. There's an enormous amount of hurt there. Also very strong, depending on the person and the situation, strong accusations, you know. It's all thoughts, it's thoughts, it's thoughts. So the Buddhist method of learning to know your mind is you know, the sort of the formal techniques that one learns to use, called meditation, are just very skillful psychological methods, that's all. The word in Tibetan for meditation is the word gom, and it means simply to familiarise. So take away all from your own mind for a moment, all concepts of what you think meditation is, okay? Because you have this very vague notion, it's sort of like, you know, with nice music and incense and low lights and a good feeling and relaxed and all that, kind of like no thoughts and all this. It's a very cliched view. There are many kinds of meditation, but broadly speaking, first one kind, for example, concentration meditation, is where you're learning to harness the energy of this crazy mind, this uncontrolled thoughts, you know, thoughts, angry thoughts, jealous thoughts, attached thoughts, fearful thoughts, stressed thoughts, anxious thoughts, accusing thoughts, vindictive thoughts. You know, this is the one, isn't it? All uncontrolled. We know from the moment we wake up until the moment we become unconscious. They're just going like a train, aren't they? Non-stop. And this is again an interesting, you know, assumption we all have. We think, well, this is just the way the mind is, you know. But the Buddhist point is, we have got one of the potentials we have, forget about the emotional stuff, one of the potentials we have is to harness these uncontrolled thoughts to a degree that we don't even consider possible in the West. There's no techniques for it. It's very simple. There are no such thing as techniques to help harness the thoughts. And this is exactly the function of this particular kind of meditation. It's a specifically, you know, it's a very, you can say this, sophisticated psychological technique, a method, a technique. You don't have to be religious to do it. A communist could do it, you know. It's not religious. It's just such a cliched idea. It's just Buddhism, and Buddhism didn't even invent this. They took it from the Hindus. These highly sophisticated, highly developed methods, techniques for harnessing the mind. So if you want to be a better cook, a better gangster, you need decent concentration, you know. Go off and meditate. In fact, one of our friends in prison from years ago in Michigan, a Puerto Rican gangster, ex-gangster, he heard about meditation. The gangsters, especially the Mexicans and the Puerto Ricans, they really like the idea of discipline and respect and, you know, kind of, so they like this about Buddhism. So this guy, Timothy, he heard about it. He was very inspired to learn. He was full of anger and rage and everything, and he heard about meditation. He heard you can get kind of real control over the mind and get power, you know. He said, great, they can just get this and then you can destroy his enemies, he thought, you know. So he started to meditate. And he said he got happy instead. He got a big surprise. And so he just really enjoyed. He was very surprised. So, why did I tell you that? For some reason. Yeah, that's right. He was trying to get power to harm his enemies, and he got happy instead. Whatever, that was fortunate because he got a nice feeling. Many people, you know, it just gets more difficult when you try. But the point that Buddha's making is, using these techniques, you can really, you know, the long-term goal of it is to get quite refined concentration, which means the capacity to actually control the thoughts. I mean, this is a brand new concept for us, right? You know? We don't learn this at school. Control your mind. We hear it enough, you know, but we don't know how to do it because we don't have techniques in our culture. It's very simple. So just this one alone Enormous benefit. I mean, we might not get concentration so quickly because it's pretty hard to control this crazy stuff, especially now that we're not 5, you know. So, but one of the immediate advantages of doing concentration meditation, as it's called, is that you can't help noticing the constant chatter. I mean, right now, because we don't have methods to really listen carefully to what's happening in here, we only notice what's happening in here when it's very, very loud, when it becomes anger or strong depression or strong jealousy or very, very happy. Then we notice we've got some feelings. We notice we have thoughts. But most of the time, if you think about it, from the second we wake up in the morning, we're totally preoccupied with the outside world, with the objects of the senses, you know. So inside here is just chatting away, chatting, isn't it? Constant, unceasing. But we virtually never notice the contents at all. Like I said, only when it's very loud. And then it's a bit late. Then we've got to go find a therapist, you know, and take some serotonin. Because we haven't, not even not dealt with it, we haven't even heard it. This is the tragedy. And again, we just think, well, that's the way life is, you know. I mean, it's shocking if you think about it. And no wonder we have problems. Because the thoughts are going all the time. So can you only imagine, since we're children, we're brought up in an environment that encourages us to notice what we're thinking, gives us techniques to do that. We're encouraged to know that these are our thoughts and our feelings, that we can harness them, we can comprehend them, and we can change them. Can you imagine what we'd be like now? We'd be amazing beings, you know. So that's the job, that's what we have to learn to do. Don't call it religious, just call it common sense, you know. Of course, the major problem, what causes it to be difficult for us, is because it's not our habit. Anything that isn't your habit is very hard to develop, isn't it? I mean, look how hard it is to become a musician. You know, like the status quo is you're not a musician. It's extremely hard to train the fingers, to train the mind, memorise all that music. You've got to train for years, don't you, to change the habit of being a non-musician into a musician. You've got to be very motivated. You've got to have long-term patience, good teachers. There's a lot of conditions you've got to bring together in order to do it, you know. And mostly we've got to have this perseverance. We mostly give up. When it's difficult, we give up, you know. We sink into our comfort zone. So to become a musician, to become a physicist, to get rich, I tell you, is a lot easier than changing anger, changing jealousy, changing depression. That's the interesting point. Because I think the emotions affect us far more powerfully than anything else. And we see them as the status quo, concrete, frozen in space. This is who I am. It's virtually instinctive, you know. So to go against that instinctive sense of self needs enormous practice. Enormous practice. And in order to practice anything, as I said before, you've got to be very inspired to do it. You've got to really want to do it. And that means what? You know, you've got to have a vision of your potential right in front of you. You've got to know what it's like to be a musician. You've got to have people around you who have accomplished it, who are constantly reminding you of what it's like to be that musician. Otherwise you'll forget. You'll soon give up very quickly. Same with the mind. My goodness. With the emotions, though, they're much more intense because your ability to not play music doesn't fill you with panic and fear, but the ability to not give up depression, the ability to not, you know, to stop being angry, it fills us with so much other emotions, you know, doesn't it? So one of the habits we have, the Buddha would say, is like causing us to really suffer, is this one of believing this is who I am. What can I do? You know, it's actually believing that. That's the killer, you know. Bad enough, the anger, the jealousy, but the worst one is that we believe this is who I am. This is who I am. What can I do? Then, of course, the other aspect that makes it extremely difficult to even want to work on your mind, forget about believing you can, is the philosophy we have, the blame philosophy, meaning the causes of suffering and the causes of happiness. When we're totally believing, which we all do, that suffering comes from out there, then, and Buddha suggests that you can be less angry. You'll think, well, excuse me, why should I stop being angry? It's his fault. That's very real for us, isn't it? So we don't even want, we want to stop suffering, but I'm so convinced that he is the cause of my suffering that it seems just bizarre to us to think that we should work on our anger. It's like, how dare you say that? Especially when it's very heavy things, Let's say, if something really awful has happened in your life, someone's killed your sister or something, really strong, intense things, clearly things that are really bad, wrong, clearly it's wrong. Buddha totally agrees with morality is the basis in Buddhism. But to not harm others clearly is one of the major ways to live the life. Don't harm others. So clearly if someone harms you, what we're saying, what we would say in the world is, well, of course I'm angry. We just say it's natural. In fact, the logic is, I'm angry because that person killed my sister. I'm using an extreme example on purpose, So it seems insane if a person were to come along and say, well, Robina, you'd suffer less if you weren't so angry. We'd be outraged to hear this. It would sound so shocking to us, wouldn't it? We say, it's like, it sounds like so heavy, as if someone's blaming you. But it's right to be angry, But again, the Buddha's point is not a question of saying it's right that a person kills your sister. It's right that a person jumps in front of you on the road and, and drives in front of you. It's right. He's not saying it's wrong to harm others. There's no question. But the Buddhist approach is this very realistic approach that, of course, it's wrong that someone harmed you. No one can argue with that. But what he's saying is, now let's see what you can do about yourself. Now let's see what you can do about learning to get happy. Because you want to be happy. You want to be happy. You don't want to suffer. But he's saying, as long as you have the belief that the main cause of your suffering is that person's unkind action, then you are paralyzed. You're paralyzed. You'll just keep being angry and you'll keep suffering. So I think the people we know in prison are such good examples here, People we know, let's say in prison for life or on death row or something, or long sentences, whatever, and who are having, living in a lousy situation for whatever reason. Normal terms, we would call that suffering. If you're sitting there, especially, let's say, a dramatic situation where you're living, like a lot of people in the prisons now, in California there's quite a few, and in other states as well, these top security prisons where you're in your cells virtually all the time, 23 hours a day, let's say, and you maybe have 1 hour in another place, virtually like another cell, to walk up and down to get some exercise. And that's it, and you're there for months, if not years. You have very few possessions, the food is lousy, the noise is outrageous. It's really it's like a really awful environment, an environment that we would all say is the cause of suffering. So naturally a person who lives in that has to be suffering. Now again, the Buddha's point is that no matter what situation we're in, with training, we can change the way we think, the way we feel about something. That's the one that we can change. So, a lot of the people we know in prison, whom we're helping, whom we communicate with, and whom we send books to and support in their practice and so on, are really proving this, proving that this is possible. Because when you're really realistic and you realise, can I open that door? Can I open that gate? Can I change the judge's mind? Can I, when you really and something as concrete as being in a prison, you have to face the fact that you can't change it. So what are your options? Well, the Buddha would say, it sounds a bit shocking to us, sure, if you can change something, please change it. But if you can't, then why go crazy? Why worry? And it's so shocking to us to hear these words, but it's so starkly practical. You can't argue with it. But when we look at the characteristics of anger, if you look at the words of anger, you know, you transcribe them and you read the words. If you hear the words are what? How dare this? This is wrong. This should not be happening. There's all if and should and but and why not and how dare. It's all about how things aren't. It's all about how things aren't, and we kind of rave on about that. But it's not, you know, in a simple way to say it, it's not being realistic. So again, it's always good to have extreme examples. There's a woman I read about years ago in a yoga magazine, a woman in prison who was on death row. And she was innocent. She got out after 17 years. So can you imagine, you're innocent, you're on death row. I mean, the whole system is against you, from the accusers, the judge, the jury, you know, the prosecutors, the people in the prison, everything from there down. And there you are, innocent. But the whole, this gigantic mountain of a system has said certain things. And you're in this prison with the door locked. And you're going to get killed soon. I mean, look how upset we get when someone just does the wrong thing like that. You know, the red light's going on too long. The person talks too loud. I mean, we practically have mental breakdowns, don't we? So can you imagine a situation like that? It doesn't take too much just to think about it. It would be quite unbearable, right? Enough for what we would think would cause us to go completely insane. Well, this woman was interesting. In the beginning, out of her mind with rage, you know. But slowly, because of the kind of person she was, she came to this profound conclusion, which is the point we're making here, that she couldn't change the situation. She was not capable of changing the situation. She couldn't change the minds of all those people, and she couldn't open those prison gates. So she said, I decided I'm not a prisoner. I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell. I'm in a cave. So she did exactly the way Buddhism would talk about, the most profound level. You literally change the way you think about your situation. You change the way you interpret your situation. That really is what changing all the emotions is about. Changing anger. Anger actually, as I'm saying, is a series of thoughts. It's a very elaborate description of a situation, isn't it? This should not be happening. I did not do that. Who do you think you are? It's a whole series of very kind of emotional, you know, accusations, statements about things. Now, there was another person I heard about on death row, wrongly accused, who would for days and months and weeks, as much as he could, scream at the top of his lungs, I did not rape and kill Mary Smith. I mean, went on and on and on and on, out of his mind with tormented rage. Now, the fact is, they're both in prison. They're both innocent. They both can't change it. They're both right. They're both correct. They didn't do it. Very simple. Now, if you look at quality of life, which person would you rather be, you know? Which person actually began to experience some peace of mind and happiness? It's obvious. The one who had the capability of recognizing her situation, knowing she couldn't change it, facing reality, in other words, and then learning to change the way she experienced her situation. This is the way to say it. This is what Buddhist practice is about. So you've got to be very brave to even want to do it. Because if you analyse the way our anger is, we're so full of this vindictiveness, this outrage, this kind of, but I'm right. What do you mean I should give up being angry? I'm right, you know. Of course I'm angry at George Bush. It is wrong to bomb people. We'll say, what do you mean stop being angry? It seems like a cop-out to stop being angry, doesn't it? Because we think anger somehow has some virtue in it, especially if it's over noble things like wars, you know. Okay, you feel a bit embarrassed if you're angry with your husband for eating his eggs too loud or something. I know you kind of feel bad about that. But when it comes to being George Bush dropping bombs or whoever it is you disagree with, we feel noble in our anger, like it's right to be angry, because we see it as a logical response to something unjust. But again, the Buddha's saying exactly the same. If you can change George Bush, if you can stop him dropping bombs, please go to Washington, D.C., get an appointment, and ask him to change his mind. Oh, sure, why not? I'll stop tomorrow. Ring up Iraq. Please stop dropping bombs. Fine, mission accomplished. Now you can relax. Now, somehow we know it's not like that, right? So the thing is, again here, a misconception that we've got is that we think, in a situation like that, we mix the anger with kind of a sense of justice. And that's why we would think it's natural that a person who's on death row would be angry, especially if they're innocent. Not to mention other people who are innocent. But the Buddha's saying the same thing, you know. If you can change it, please do. But why go crazy if you can't? I mean, I think Dalai Lama is a perfect example here. You know, the trouble is, though, we have all these cliched ideas about what a Buddhist is, and these nice Buddhists, they just like their enemies and they must watch their breath nicely or something. We don't know what it is. But look, they're all these nice people who like their enemies. We get all these very vague ideas about it. Well, anyone who can see the Dalai Lama, first you look at his situation, you know. Last 45 years or so, country being destroyed by people who aren't Tibetans. These Chinese communists have come in, taken over the country, you know, destroyed it, destroyed the monasteries, destroyed the environment. I mean, even 10 years ago, I saw a video in which it said that they're trucking trees out of Tibet for 24 hours a day, for 40 years. Still happening. I mean, appalling things are happening in that country. And basically the Dalai Lama is the father of those people, so it's like his 6 million children, you know. Now, everyone, so if you look at the suffering situation on the one hand, and then you look at him. I mean, he's this happy guy. Everyone can see he's a happy guy. We ought to be blowing our minds thinking, my God, why is this man happy, you know? Doesn't he realise his country's suffering? But we don't ask that question. We think, well, it's just these Buddhists, you know, they're happy people. I mean, it's so insulting, actually. The reason he's like this is because he's worked on his mind, you know? He's given up anger. Very simple. He hasn't given up seeing, you know, a sense of injustice. How could he have given that up? That'd be ridiculous. He's given up anger. He's given up jealousy. He's given up depression. In other words, he's become really practical. He can see a situation. Can I change it? No, I can't. Well, he doesn't stop trying. He hasn't stopped trying to change the Tibetan situation for 45 years. But it hasn't made him crazy. He's not on serotonin. He's not going to counselling, you know. He's not dropping bombs. So it's starkly in front of us, this amazing example of how to be in the face of violence. And it's sort of interesting, actually, I have to say, in this country, for example, people really like him, you know. Amazing, wow, far out, this incredible person loves his enemies. But it's interesting, at the time of September 11, when you guys got attacked, people, you could read things about, well, who does he think he is anyway this time? No one wants to know about the Dalai Lama, you know. He's the example of how to be. You all love it when you didn't get attacked. You know, the people who kind of, you know, all happy, oh, wow, amazing, loves his enemies. And you suddenly get bombed. Everyone's allowed to be angry. Like impatient hearing such pathetic goody-goody stuff as the Dalai Lama. I remember somebody responding like, you know, like he was one of the many people who was quoted as saying something, all the politicians and things. But the kind of things he was saying, mostly people in America didn't want to hear what he had to say, because we have this sense of righteousness in our anger. And we can see with respect in the country, you know, millions of people, the righteousness of the anger. It was like the nobility of the anger. Well, the Buddhists would say it's not beneficial, it doesn't help. Look, it's causing bombs and paranoia and wars, you know. But the trouble is, again, like I said, we mix anger with a sense of justice. They're completely separate states of mind, you know. The Buddhist response to September 11, yeah, your heart breaks. Your heart breaks when you see the suffering. But it increases your wish to continue to give up your own anger, your own jealousy, your own pride. You continue to wish to become more compassionate and benefit others, and you have compassion for others. And you do what you can, you know. But to be angry, to be full of fear and rage and all the stuff that, the responses that people had, the Buddhist view, if you're really working with the Buddhist approach, they wouldn't have been the responses you would have had, you know. So it's hard to be happy from the Buddhist point of view because we have a series of misconceptions about what it is and what causes it. We think it's out there because we don't realise that we can change our mind. But the Buddhist approach is, the fact is, it is possible to be happy. Very simple. It is possible to be happy. And I think, again, the Dalai Lama is a great example. He is a happy person. You cannot say he's not. But he's full of compassion. He's in tears when he sees the suffering of his people. No contradiction, you know. Because the Buddhist point about what happiness and suffering is, when we think of suffering, we think of like when you see suffering people and you feel compassion for them, when you call that suffering. The Buddhist attitude to suffering, speaking internally, is very specific. It's the unhappy states of mind. It's the unhappy states of mind within you. To say the Dalai Lama is a happy person means he's not a suffering person. That means he doesn't have anger, jealousy, depression, neurosis, blame, vindictiveness, resentment, lying, killing, stealing. Because Buddha would say the presence of those in our mind is the real reason why we are not happy. They are the one. Not the outside world, not George Bush dropping bombs, not being on death row unfairly. They play a major role. You can't say they don't. And this is like a technical point, you know, very specific. Of course they play a role. Of course a person shouldn't abuse you. But the Buddhist point is, and it's so profound, it isn't the main cause of your suffering. Your own mind is. It's not blame. It's unbelievably empowering, actually. Because Buddha's saying when you can change the way you think, then you even, you know, have the most intense suffering situation. When you're really practiced, you will still be able to retain your sanity and your happy mind, you know. Okay, you might be laughing happily when you're being tortured. But there's something there that's solid. I remember, again, another example. A couple of years ago, I was in New York, participating at a thing that Richard Gere, his foundation, invited the Dalai Lama and to teach, and also invited a bunch of ex-prisoners, all of whom had been working with Buddhism in prison. You know, a whole cross-section of Americans, like, you know, some black Americans and white Americans and American Indians and all blah, 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 you know, Mexican Americans and so on. People who'd been in prison, men and women and so on, 20 of them. And among them were they invited a couple of Tibetan nuns who'd been imprisoned, right? And so there was an all-day meeting, everybody talking and you know, sharing their experiences and everything. And they had a meeting with the Dalai Lama. It was very moving. And a few people like me were invited as well, because we work with people. And what was really interesting, these two Tibetan nuns, these young women, okay, they'd been in prison a couple of years in Tibet, and they had been tortured daily, brutalised, tortured, physically, sexually, tortured, you know. More suffering than all the other people combined. There's no question. And everybody could see this. But what was totally interesting to the people, you know, the other people who'd been in prison, was that these two young women were not angry, were not depressed, were not freaking out, were not on serotonin, weren't going to counselling, and didn't have anger towards their torturers. They actually had compassion. And they weren't showing off about it, you could tell. So they were sad. You couldn't say they weren't. Tears were coming. But in the Buddhist point of view, from the Buddhist point of view, they weren't suffering. Brutal, physical, yes, that was suffering. But the kind of suffering the Buddha's talking about is the suffering of the delusions, the suffering of anger, jealousy, pride, crazy, depressed. It's not blame. There's no blame here. It's simply looking at it very clearly, that is the source of the suffering. So that when they were able to leave that situation, they hadn't lost their minds. A sadness, yes, but they were solid and sane and grounded and kind and compassionate and wise. They were able, it was a painful situation. Given the opportunity to walk out the door of that prison, of course they would have taken it. Who wants to be tortured? Nobody. But what I'm saying is, even in the face of something as intense as that, the Buddhist view is saying, if you've worked on your mind, no one can destroy you mentally. Whereas you look at the West, the logic we use is, even if we see something slightly suffering, we've got to rush off to a counsellor, and be on serotonin. Because we just assume that depression and anxiety comes from seeing something bad or something bad happening to you. We just assume that is the cause. Person harmed you, you're going to have post-stress, whatever you call it. You do this, you're going to have anger. You do this, you're going to get depressed. That's the logic we use, and that's the logic Buddha's disagreeing with. He says it's not accurate. So just don't believe this. Think about it. And like I'm saying, if once in your life, you can see that you woke up, that you were happy one day even when something horrible was happening out there, and you were sad one day even when everything was nice, that proves Buddha's point. It proves Buddha's point, So like I'm saying, it's not a blame thing, it's not a guilt thing, it's not like a moralistic issue. It's a practical one. And it's unbelievably empowering. And then, if you want to go off and help the world, when you see all the suffering out there and the bombs dropping, when you're not full of rage and anger and all this stuff, then you're capable of helping. You're a complete mess if you're just full of your own emotions, We can change our minds. We can mould our minds into any shape we like. This is the point that Buddha's making. This is practice. And it's for our own benefit. Then also for the benefit of others. So I don't know. Why don't you ask me some questions? Tell me what you think, or think it's a load of rubbish or something, whatever you like.
If you could just wait before you ask the questions to just get the mic.
Okay.
Because we're going to tape this for the DVD.
Where's the mic? Who's got it? Okay, good. Go. Who's got a question? Behind you.
Here, I'll run around with you.
Oh.
Back there.
Oops. Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question about post-traumatic stress.
By the way, can someone describe to me what that means? I mean, I'm not being rude or anything. What are the symptoms of having this?
A startle response.
Who?
A startle response after a very active startle response after
Sorry, what
an
do you mean?
event.
Forgive me, please explain.
Like you jump when people approach you, or doesn't seem like any apparent reason. Maybe there's a therapist in this group that could possibly tell you what that might be. But
I see.
It's a very startling experience to let's say having bombs dropped on top of you.
Oh, I see.
Or
Okay.
being tortured.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think necessarily that the person would have anger maybe toward their torturer or even the bombs. But post-traumatic stress disorder is a valid diagnosis.
Is it what though? What is it? What causes it?
It's being in situations like being raped, like
So,
being
but my point
battered.
is, so what about the point I'm saying here about these young Tibetan nuns who didn't have it? Why would you think that is?
Maybe they were better at creating a situation of having their mind in a different spot while they were being tortured. Other people, what they do is they disassociate.
Sure. So what's your
And then
question?
one day they
So
finally
anyway.
have to deal with it,
Yeah,
and I do think
that's
there's
right.
a place for therapy.
Of course
I
there
really
is.
believe that there is. And
Of course.
I
But can you see the point? Anyway, is this your question, or you have? I'm
well,
not being.
I'm just
Go on.
asking you,
Go on.
aren't different
Yeah.
people at different spots in their lifetime
Sure.
where they would need that?
Sure, of course.
And
But isn't the
so-
point, surely, what I just said before, as long as we have the view that our suffering is caused mainly by an external situation, as long as you go in your life with that view, then of course it would be natural that you'd have that response to being tortured, that response to the loud noises, that response to...
Right.
Whereas what I'm saying here is that if you start to change your view and know that it is possible to work on your feelings and your emotions every day of your life and have the power to do this, that when something does happen, you wouldn't get post-traumatic distress, whatever you call it. You wouldn't get depression. You wouldn't have blame. That's the simple point that I'm making. Can you hear what I'm saying?
I'm just asking
Yes.
you if you know
Yeah.
that some people aren't at that spot.
Well, what
And
do
they
you think?
Well,
Do you think I don't know that? What are you suggesting?
No, I'm just
See,
suggesting.
really, what are you suggesting though?
What I'm suggesting.
What are you asking? You asking me,
was
do I
thinking
realise what?
That you were making a blanket statement that that's the best way you can be. And
Whereas,
some
hey,
people
wait a
just
minute,
aren't
go
there.
back, sweetie. It's really important. So say your point carefully again, the different points, and we can discuss
Do
them.
you believe that people need help of a therapist or someone else, that they can't just do it by themselves?
Do what, my dear?
Make this mind by themselves.
Make what mind?
This perfect mind. That,
What perfect mind? Who's mentioned
that
the word
wouldn't-
perfect?
That wouldn't, okay. I'm sorry, I guess I...
No, it's really, really, really good what you're saying. So I'm having a really precise discussion with you.
I guess I'm not very good at precise.
You need to be. It's important because you're asking questions and it's great.
Yeah.
So ask the questions and it's fine. So then come on. You said things like make this perfect mind.
Yeah.
I don't recall ever saying
Right.
those words here. So where does that come from in this context? So again, put your question in a different way, freshly. Just ask in a different way for your sake.
Well, do you have
What's the
a
question?
sense of how long someone would need help to have that kind
What
of
do you
mind?
mean need help?
Um,
What are you saying?
To recover.
I'm
from
not
a
even, forget this, I'm not
Okay.
discussing that.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is the principle, the view that Buddha would have, which we need to think about the truth of, that we do have the potential to change the way we think and feel.
Okay.
That's the first point. Now, in general, out of interest, do you agree with that? Out of interest, I'm just curious what your feelings are.
I believe, personally,
Yes.
I believe that people need help sometimes.
No, that's not the
Yeah.
point I'm asking you. I didn't say we don't need help. We all need help desperately.
Yeah.
I've never said we don't.
Yeah.
I'm asking you if you think it's possible for you to work on your jealousy and your anger.
Oh, of
For
course.
example,
For-
do
of
you think
course,
so?
Of course.
Well, that is all I am talking about. So we agree on that point.
Mm-hmm.
So now your question is, do you think you're asking me whether it's appropriate that we get help to do this? My dear, wherever you can get help, you get it, please. If anything that will help you change your mind, you please get that help. Anything. I don't care what you call it. Call it, eating carrots. Call it standing on your head. Call it having a therapist. I don't care what you call it. If your wish is to develop your potential to be less angry and less jealous and less neurotic and less fearful, my dearest, do anything. I don't care what it is. That isn't the issue here. It is the simple point for us to get some kind of confidence that, hey, I can learn to know my mind and I can learn to change it. And then the bonus would be that if you do happen to get tortured next year, you'll be more capable of dealing with it. That's the point I'm
Right.
saying. That's all. So are we communicating here now? Are you agreeing with these points I'm saying? And if not, then ask me another question.
I think I'm going to let somebody else ask a question.
But are we communicating here?
Well,
Take the mic, talk.
what I was trying to say was that you made an issue that these people were so wonderful because they could stand all that. And I'm
made
just
an
saying-
issue that these people were so wonderful that they could stand all
staying
that.
in prison, being tortured by other people.
And
Whereas
what-
some of us, like me, I don't know if I would stand that.
But
I
that's
might
but
do
that-
something
just a
crazy.
moment. But that's fine, isn't it? Isn't it okay? Isn't it inspiring to hear that it's
Yeah.
possible?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Of
that's the
course,
point.
Of course.
Of course, I didn't make an issue. That's an interesting word you should use.
Well,
make an
I
issue.
like one person's better than the other because they
Who
can do
said that? Who suggested this?
Oh, see,
No, listen. No, hey, listen. Keep the microphone right there. This is a really good conversation because this is what communication is about.
Yeah.
Is when we hear certain words, we put certain
Meanings
onto
on
it.
them.
So you're putting certain meanings onto it, and that's cool. But we need to see that. You're saying I made an issue out of it. You're saying I'm suggesting these people are better than others. I didn't say those words. I'm not being defensive, but it's really important to hear what we think ourselves, you know. So there's something when you heard that, you heard that,
Yeah.
you know.
That's
Do you see
what
my
I heard,
point?
Yeah.
So this is an interesting discussion then. Can you accept that I wasn't saying what you just thought I was saying? Can you accept that that was, that
I
I
think
wasn't?
they're better prepared. Yeah.
But let's just say you're both on the freeway and one person has done some driving and you haven't done some driving. You can deduce fairly simply that if the person who doesn't crash, it means they've done some driving, right? So you'd learn from that, wouldn't you? Well, I better go learn drive. Not, oh, well, they're better than me. How dare they? I'm just not prepared. You learn from it. But the point is it's possible to drive. The point is it's possible to work on our minds. The reason I used examples, extreme examples, is to try and inspire us to say, wow, I can do that too. Not, oh, who do they think they are? They're better than me. Do you see my point?
I didn't say
No,
that.
I know, but I'm saying that might be a conclusion. That wasn't the point.
Mm-hmm.
The point is to show that I think extreme examples are good ones to prove the point that it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us won't get tortured in this life. But, you know, we get irritated at the smallest thing, don't we? So all I'm pointing out is that we have the potential to change the way we think and feel. That's the point. That's the heart point here, actually. Go. Is that, you content with that? No, you're not content yet. Continue, please.
Oh, I
Get the microphone. Say it.
Well, I guess I have I have a small problem.
Good. Please say it.
Maybe nobody else has a problem in here with this.
That's
but-
good. Say it.
But I guess because I've worked in mental health before,
Right.
this is why I'm having a hard time with the way this is being put forward.
So which is the point that you have the hard time
Well,
with? Let me know.
Well, I have a hard time with you saying nobody's taking. These people didn't have to take serotonin at the
Right.
first time somebody's
Right.
yelled at them or did
Right.
something like that.
Yes.
But there's just different kinds of people, I believe,
Uh-huh.
and not everybody
Uh-huh.
can. Not everyone comes to Buddhism the same way
Uh-huh.
as someone else might either, because
Sure.
they may be more of an academic person, another person may be, a different type of person,
Sure.
and the way they enter things, and so,
Sure.
maybe this lifetime my serotonin's off the wall,
Sure.
but next time maybe it won't be. That's all I'm saying is different people have different things to contend with. I guess this is why I'm having a hard time with what you're talking about.
So which
with
aspect
mental
are you
health.
having the hard time with?
Talking about the serotonin, the post-traumatic stress, that's what I was having a problem with.
Why is that a problem?
Well, because I don't think everyone's given the same biological features to deal with.
But we're not talking biology, we're talking the mind.
Well, I think,
Listen, I agree with you. Please
well,
take...
serotonin's different in me than it is in you, probably. But
it's perfect. No, I'm not complaining about serotonin.
Yeah. But
I think
don't
serotonin's a fantastic... Like I said before, if it helped... Well, any tool we can use to help us work on our mind,
Right.
including serotonin, go for it.
Yeah.
I rejoice.
Okay.
Again, I'm making the point,
Mm-hmm.
which should be inspiring, not depressing. We shouldn't feel attacked by it. It should be inspiring for us that it is possible for us all. I'm not saying everyone will ever do it, but the fact that it's possible is the one. And then we meanwhile use whatever tools we've got. Be humble, be content with the tools. If that's called serotonin, go for it. If that's called going to a therapist, go for it. If that's called standing on your head, like I said, whatever it is, be happy and use the tools. But the reason we take our serotonin is so we can work on our minds. The reason we go to our therapist is so we can develop our qualities. The reason we do any of these things is to do that. And if that's the case, fantastic. Yes, we're all at different stages of development. Of course it is. Whether a person's at grade 1 or grade 12, we're all on the same track. And it should be inspiring to us, those who are at grade 12. No? Go for it. Take your serotonin. Nothing to do with criticism. No way.
Has anyone ever asked you a question like this before?
Of course,
oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
I feel like, man.
No, it's totally fine.
Okay.
So what have you got from this conversation? Tell me what you've got from
Well,
this conversation,
what
or from
I-
this whole discussion.
what
that you
I
can
kind
take
of-
away with that's positive for you.
What I kind of thought was
Yeah.
that everybody was different. And what I thought you were saying was, I was misinterpreting maybe what you were saying was that you said go for it, and I was taking the, because people have to use that, I thought you were criticizing people that had to do those kind of things.
And why would I be so cruel as to criticize people? No, it's a good point, darling. I'm talking to you. Why would I want to criticize people? Why would I want to be so horrible as to criticize people?
I think it's a thing that people do criticize.
I know, but I'm
not
talking about me
saying that
here.
you're being horribly.
No, but I'm talking about me now, here, because I said the words.
Yeah.
Why would I want to criticize people? How harsh, how horrible.
I was merely asking a question and maybe trying to clarify because I am.
That's right.
Because I am. What would you call it? I err on the side, and I've been in that situation, and I've worked in that situation.
Yes, exactly.
So
I
that's
understand
why
exactly.
I'm very protective.
Yes,
I guess
I hear
maybe
you.
that's
I
what
understand totally. I hear you very much. I hear
Yeah.
you. So then, when you walk out the door tonight, is there something that you find from this that you can take that will be something useful for you? And if not, that's perfect too. I'm just curious.
That's what I've always told people. Do
What's
what
that?
you need to do in life to help
Yes.
get yourself
Yeah.
toward wellness on that
Exactly.
pathway.
Exactly. That's
toward
right.
Yeah.
Totally that. I totally,
Right.
totally agree.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone here. And here. 2. Yeah. 3. 4. 4. 5. Just you remember your numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You're 4. You're 5. You're 2. Where's 3? Somewhere. There she is. 3. He. Remember your numbers. Okay. Just pass. Yes.
Good evening.
Good
Thank you
evening.
for all the lovely things you've said.
Okay.
I have suffered a whole lifetime of depression and anxiety.
Yes.
I've tried every medication you could possibly name.
Yes.
I've been to psychiatrists and therapists, but it's never left me.
Mhm.
And I'm 70 years of age now.
Right.
And I've found it's something you can't speak about around people. It makes you unpopular. So that when I'm with people, I put on this happy face. I'm not happy. Oh, would I love to be happy before I die. But I put on this happy face and just act normal, seemingly normal, and it seems to work. Okay. But now around my 3 children, it doesn't matter if I laugh and joke or whatever I do, they're not satisfied because I say, but hey, I've been fine today, what's the problem? But we know you're depressed. Underneath, we know it because we love you and we're close to you. And 2 of my children are actually, we had a day out on Memorial Day, which I thought was great, but they said, no, it wasn't, because we could sense your underlying depression. And we actually had a ball, a party. We were laughing and joking. I said, what, my son won't come to see me from Sacramento because of her depression.
Right.
So I'm like this monster that's not trying. And my daughter says, do you realize what pain it's caused us? And I said, you think I want to be this way? And you see, I want to be happy more than anything on earth. And I mean anything.
Yes.
A relationship, a fortune, fame, fortune, you name it. Because I actually have very little now at this stage of my life.
Yes.
And I give this, I'm a good actress, so I give this persona of being happy. But people know I'm not. And so...
So what do you think happy? What do you mean by happy?
Well...
What do you mean by happy?
Well, I would like to feel good. So when I'm giving out this this appearance of feeling good, I do not feel good, even though I'm putting on a good act, because people say, "Oh, she's the most cheerful person we know." And if I say I suffer from depression, they crack up laughing.
Sure.
So it's this is my point, how I've tried to change that into happiness. And the fear and the anxiety and the awful depression, how long I've tried to change that. But it is still there. It still haunts me and torments me. Even though I put on an appearance of being happy whenever I'm in company. Except, you know, perhaps with the odd one or two very close friend who understands or has a similar situation. So, you know, I felt, I so wanted to say that to you.
Sure.
About the happiness thing.
Yes, I understand.
I put so much effort into it. And even non-effort.
Yes.
And it's a cause of great distress to me.
I have nothing really to say, except I'm hearing what you're saying, you know, and I think every single one of us, to one extent or another, have an understanding of what you're saying, because every one of us has our jealousy and our fears and our depression and our anxiety and whatever it is, you know. So what do you think about, from what you just heard here? Does it make sense?
I think it makes absolute sense, and I'm all for it. It's just if something in me could click in and find that. That's why I'm here now, to find some element of peace, some element of contentment. That's why I came.
I understand. And is there something you think you've heard that you can use as a tool? What do you think?
Well, nothing really that I haven't read or heard before so far, because I read a lot of Zen, and I study a lot of Buddhism, but and so it's absolutely right on what you say. But like you say, to change the mind is more difficult than, say, changing the situation in Iraq or anything. It is so difficult. But yes, absolutely, I agree with everything you've said.
It's not easy, is it?
No.
I agree. But are there reasons you think you can rejoice in the way you lead your life and rejoice in your efforts to make other people happy? And that's something good, isn't it?
Oh yes, that is good. I do quite a lot of that.
Yes.
I'm able
that's
to
incredible.
encourage other
That's
people
right. That's
and
right.
you know, inspire them and encourage them.
Exactly.
Even though I feel so awful most of the time.
I understand. Well, I think it's admirable.
Thank you. I guess I've taken up enough time.
That's perfectly fine, my darling. Thank you very much.
Who's next?
Number 2, I think, or 3, I can't remember. Here we are.
Could I make a brief comment about that? She doesn't have to own their blame.
Are you
for
giving her a
their
little teaching
attitude,
here, or are you
right?
asking a question?
I'm giving a teaching. You don't have to own their blame. Yeah, you don't have to own their blame. Yeah, it's not your problem.
Kunga, can you pass the mic on, please?
Yes, sir.
Don't take any notice of him, darling.
I wanted to make a comment on this, the post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
Like, my idea of post-traumatic stress syndrome is that it's lingering fear. The way
Your
she described it
idea.
is
What do you
lingering.
mean, your idea?
My understanding is that it's lingering fear. My own understanding with myself with post-traumatic stress syndrome is that it's fear that's lingering. Like, people
I
have bombs
see.
dropped from them,
I
they're
see,
still
yes, yes,
lingering
yes.
with fear.
Sure. Yeah, I understand.
And there's things with abuse from whatever, parents or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm wondering, is fear, can we link it with something such as anger? What is it linked with?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Psychologically speaking, the way the Buddhist model of the mind, the kind of the like at the root of all the stuff we have, whether it's depression or anger or all these things, the root of it, and it just seems a bit conceptual to us, is this very profound kind of primordial mistaken sense of self. It's very deep ingrained, and its nature is fear. So fear actually is behind depression, anxiety, whatever it is we call, jealousy. And the Buddha's point, and unless we look at this very carefully, it just sounds awfully conceptual, but it's quite profound if we can look into it. The Buddha's view about the very way we see ourselves, this is the one I'm saying here, is absolutely at the root of it. You know, and when that is completely changed, which needs enormous amount of inner work, then they would say there literally is no fear, and there would be no anger, jealousy, depression, and all the rest. There would not be. It would be literally gone. This is what Buddha would say is possible. And we're talking kind of advanced. But the fact of the possibility is the point that I'm saying. That fear is the base of all of them, absolutely. Because there's a sense of self, I something, you know. This I something. You know, which we then reinforce. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Then. Well, you can go next. You're there. That's fine. Right here. Congo, thanks.
Just a quick question first about the post-traumatic syndrome.
Yes.
I'm not, because it's an interesting point. I'm not a therapist.
No.
I admit that. But isn't successful traditional Western therapy precisely about saying you can't change the event that caused the syndrome? You
But you
can't.
can
If you
change
had a
your-
gun
Yes.
and you shot the person who did it, you wouldn't
yes.
feel any better.
Sure.
And the only thing you could do is change your
Yes,
mind.
change yourself, yes. No, I think this
That's
is...
exactly what you. I mean, it's my understanding what you're
Well,
saying.
this is the point that they're saying here. This
Yeah.
is the point.
Yeah.
That that we have that potential, which is the empowering point.
It's the only. I mean, it's the only thing you
Yes.
could do. You can't
Yes.
change the
No,
event.
That's right.
Well,
Exactly.
anyway.
No, that is the point.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Go
my
on.
larger point was,
Yes.
or question I had for
Yeah.
you was,
Oh.
so much of being happy, as you describe it, is the prerequisite is recognizing the states of unhappiness.
That's
that you
exactly
have.
right.
Grief.
That's exactly
or
right.
Whatever.
Yes, exactly.
That part seems to me, or stress or anxiety, seems incredibly hard in our Western world. The man is a man because he stoically accepts his stress or whatever.
Sure.
Or even in anger,
Yes.
my best friend steals my girlfriend.
Right.
I'm
right.
angry,
Yes.
but I'm actually hurt. So I
Yes,
don't even
exactly.
know
No, what we feel.
what do we
that's right.
feel. So
Precisely. No, that's
how do
right.
we,
Yes.
that seems to be almost as hard a step.
No,
as,
that is the point. I think that is the point. And as I was saying before, it seems to me because it's not part of our education to learn about what arises in here. We cover it up, you know, like she's saying, she puts on the happy smile, like you're saying, you're being the man, you know. So we live in denial of what we're feeling until it gets so painful that we just can't bear it. Then
Well,
a
and
complete breakdown, you know.
and fear, because a lot of them,
All that's right.
when they're
Yes.
when they're accurately
Yes.
identified,
Yes.
they come across as vulnerability. We
That's
don't want
right.
to be vulnerable.
No, that's right. Exactly.
So besides or within meditation,
Sure.
or besides that,
Sure.
what is your ways?
Well,
to
the Buddhist approach
get at-
in general. No, the Buddhist approach in general is practicing using the formal techniques of concentrating the mind, where you're formally subduing the senses, focusing the mind on a certain thing, let's say your breath. And the byproduct of this is you can't help but hear all the chatter. Because then when your eyes are wide open and you're busy dealing with the world, the chatter's there, but you can't even notice it, like I said, until it's very strong. So at least when you're quiet, and so so in that way you develop the habit of hearing it all, therefore seeing it. And then secondly, you're able to bring that habit into your daily life. And as you get more and more skillful, and we're talking months and years, you become much more skillful at dealing with it when it arises, rather than when it's become this emotional mountain. Or it's become such painful feelings that we can't even deconstruct the feelings to see that it's all the concepts. So it's just this ongoing, skillful job, you know. And even with depression, this is what's interesting. Not even with depression. Yeah. I mean, this stuff, for me, all these emotions we have are so entrenched, I think. Even from the time we're very small children, they're already entrenched very deep. Okay, and the Buddhist explanation for why is the whole business of continuity of consciousness, and maybe I'll touch upon that, which at least is the Buddhist explanation for why we'd even be born. I mean, with you, what's your name? Joan. Since little girl, you've always had the same type of tendency, or has it developed as you got older?
I grew up during the war with a great deal of feeling,
Right.
fear and insecurity.
Yes.
I grew up during the war as a
Yes.
small child, and
Yes.
you never knew if any moment you might
Right.
get bombed or killed.
Exactly, right.
And my mother was seriously mentally ill and violent.
Yes. Right.
So, you know, I had a terribly traumatic childhood.
So since you're a child, though, is depression a tendency, or is it something
No,
you've
not
noticed
really.
as you got older?
Not really. It
Right.
came on after the birth of my
Yes.
second child.
I understand, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I
The
understand.
trauma. I had a
I
lot of
understand.
trauma with that.
Exactly, yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, okay. So first of all, we're talking about looking at the status quo, whatever it might be. A lot of depression, a bit of anger, I mean, whatever it might be. Looking at that and learning to use these techniques to deal with that. Then the bigger picture in Buddhism, which is just interesting, let's just discuss it for a moment now, it's the explanation of why. Okay, why am I like this? Why those parents? Why that situation? Why that rape? Why anything, you know? And that, of course, is the Buddhist explanation. Or even just why these feelings inside me, forget the external situations. That's the Buddhist explanation of what the mind is from the big picture point of view. And by the way, just the point with Buddhism, remember, is you don't just, it's not a question of believing something, it's a question of hearing it and then thinking about it. You know, taking it as a hypothesis. So the Buddhist view of what mind is it's not the brain. It doesn't come, our personality doesn't come from the DNA and the genes and so on. They're not coming from the parents at all, which just itself is quite a shocking concept, because I think there's an absolute assumption in all Western views, without exception, that mummy and daddy made us, right? In other words, that we started in our mother's womb and we got born a certain way. There's this package, like someone else's cookie cutter, turned me out to be that shape. You see my point? There's a very strong assumption like this, isn't there? So we just take that as a given, and that's never discussed, never questioned, right? But the Buddhist view is your thoughts and feelings and emotions and tendencies are yours, absolutely yours. They do not come from your parents. In Buddhist view also, they don't come from a superior being. We're not created by a superior being. So you can almost say, really, if you think about it, most religions and all the Western materialist views share one thing in common, that we all began in the mother's womb. But the Buddhist view would be, you know, Joan, for example. Here we have this Joan. She says she's 70. You know, so we trace, the way to think of the mind in Buddhist terms is like this river of mental moments. There's all the thoughts and feelings of Joan today, like this river of your stuff, and it comes from yesterday, and you can trace it all the way back. And if you know, back to the first moment in your mummy's womb, right, when Joan began, right? But the Buddhist, so the continuity of all those mental moments is all of Joan's thoughts and feelings and emotions, all this stuff going back and back. So this kind of mental continuum, as they would call it. You trace this back and you go back to the first moment of conception. Then, of course, if you're a Christian, you'd say God put a soul in there. That's how come Joan became Joan. And if you're a materialist, well, the mummy's and daddy's egg and sperm came together, and that's all you are, your mummy's and daddy's egg and sperm, which means you're the DNA and your genes and so on. The Buddhists would have a third view. The Buddha would say that your mummy and daddy kindly provided you with your body, but Joan's consciousness, Joan's tendencies, Joan's fears, the way Joan responded to when she was a little girl, the war, Joan's dealings when she had a child and the depression, all of the stuff that's in Joan, whatever you want to call it, and all Joan's positive qualities, her wish to appear happy, to make others happy, all of these tendencies in Joan, they are the components of Joan's mind. And if we trace those right back, you're going to find those within this continuity of your mind. You go back to the first moment of conception, clearly at a subtler level. But this consciousness, you can trace it back to a moment before conception, and a moment before that, and a moment before that, and a moment before that. So the Buddha's view of so-called reincarnation is this one, you know, that each one of us, our mind, which means our tendencies, and whether it's Mother Teresa's or Hitler's tendencies, or Joan's, they're all uniquely that person's, and they do not come from the parents. And they're only, and then you know, so let's say, for example, the Western, the materialist view would be like certain things happened to you in the war and that's why you are the way you are. The Buddhist view would be they're catalysts. Sure, they're catalysts, but they're not the main cause of Joan's mind. So Joan, within her mind, had those tendencies.
I have one burning question to ask you.
Yes.
Well, there may be more, but...
Yes.
But, and this is what a lot of people ask me or
yes.
say.
Tell me.
Now, supposing in the event that I can't get rid of this fear, this anxiety, this depression, and I die with it.
Yes, darling.
Am I going to be reborn with it in the next existence?
I understand.
That's what terrifies me.
No, darling.
That's why I want to get rid of it.
No, sweetheart.
I don't want to take it with me. I've had it all my life.
Darling, listen, it's okay. No, listen, the point is, it's more than, I'll answer that.
Thank you.
Just trying to give this general view of consciousness, continuity of consciousness. So, you know, we look at Hitler and Mother Teresa, and again, I'm using extreme examples because it's always helpful to use an extreme example. Huh?
I don't know.
Okay. You know, it's like, well, you know, it's like Hitler is the way he is because this happened when he was a child and his mummy did this. I mean, pity help poor Hitler's mummy if she's the cause of Hitler. Come on, she's an ordinary Austrian housewife. But she should be the creator of Hitler is a little bit extreme, I think. You know, I mean, it's like a bit far-fetched, isn't it, you know? So, I mean, the point is, the Buddhist view is Hitler brought all his tendencies from before. A bunch of tendencies. So we could say with Joan, just as she's talking about her mind in a certain way, there's a tendency to be depressed, a tendency to have fear, a tendency to have stress, whatever. They're your tendencies. But darling, you have a tendency to be kind. You have tendencies to be generous. You have tendencies to be loving. Do you not, Joan?
Oh, yes, very much.
And you have a tendency to want to know yourself and to be... And so they are all the tendencies in you as well, you know. So you've got all these tendencies and they're your tendencies. And so the Buddhist explanation for why we are the way we are is because they have been in our mind in the past. And so, you know, then we bring them with us. So my answer to your point would be...
About the next
what
one.
I'm hearing in you is a strong wish to understand your mind, a strong wish to be kind to others and be happy and appear happy, which is an incredibly kind thing to do. It's very compassionate. Better than you walking around with a long face and dumping yourself on all over the place. I'm not being mean about us again. I know I say blunt things, it's true, and I sound like I'm being very accusatory. I realise that's how I talk. But, you know, it's like you've made this effort to be kind and good. Well, you know, that actually, even though you don't think so, that has been constantly purifying, if you like, using that word, your other tendencies. You've been dealing with it. You've been accepting it. You've been bearing it, you know.
Yet I have this problem with my children, you see.
Inside your mind. No,
Yeah.
you don't have a problem with your children. Your children have a problem with you. You don't have a problem, darling. And I'm not being mean about your children because we all are affected by our mummy and daddy. And that's their guilt and their fears, and they see mummies depressed and they get guilty, they feel burdened by it. That's how we all are. Unfortunately, we all are, you know. But that's not your problem. You have to work on your mind and take responsibility for yours, and then, you know, that's just them, if they'll be brave enough to work on their minds, they can try and accept that. But the trouble is when we're parents and children, we're like all glued together, you know, and we all kind of wear each other's junk, don't we? And it's very difficult to not, you know. So, you know, it's okay, you know. But another point, Joan, which is not meant to sound tricky. This is where it sounds tricky, but it's not. It's very profound. Just like that woman who I mentioned on death row. She said this, she said, look, she's living in a lousy situation. She was on death row, disgusting environment, awful, you know, violence, everything around. And she said, I decided I am not a prisoner, I am a monk. I decided I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. So what I'm saying is, even to start interpreting what we're thinking and feeling in a different way is a profound way to change the way we feel. So in a sense, because we've had the habit of the depression, whatever, then it becomes a broken record. I am depressed, I'm depressed. I'm not saying there isn't a reality there. But if we keep reinforcing that one, and you're picking only certain aspects of yourself, there are other aspects of yourself. So it might be true that you have a headache all day. Some people have a headache all the time and they can't get rid of it. But if we only ever talk about the headache and only ever focus on the headache, it looms very large. This is not meant to be tricky now, and I'm not criticising, I'm just talking about the way our minds work, you know. So it's like there's many other things that are so good about Joan that Joan should be so rejoicing in and reinforcing and being glad about. I'm not saying she doesn't, but you hear my point.
Very much so.
There's many things, and that, you know, and it's like sometimes. Okay, the Buddhist view of karma is we bring all these habits with us, and things just take time. So part of it is we can't all make it go away and be perfect, just like this. So part of the burden of life is like the woman in prison. She learned to so totally accept that situation that actually she even was able to become happy in spite of it. And it sounds bizarre to say this, but even with this, it's almost like it's possible to be happy, even if we're angry, even if we're depressed. And the attitude is itself like water on the fire of the depression, on the fire of the anger. It's one of the approaches to help change it, you know.
And also, maybe that particular happy that you're speaking of
is being content with
is
it.
not the context
No.
of happy that
Happy, we
perhaps
mean
I
happy
have.
kind of hysterical, over the top kind of, you know, ridiculous happy. Happy means accepting. This is how it is. Let's make the most of it. That's what really happy. And happy also means not being angry, not necessarily not being depressed, not being jealous and resentful and all that unhappy stuff, you know. Learning to even recognise we have it, but appreciating our effort, being happy with our effort. Rejoicing that woman was able to see the good things, even though she was in a lousy situation, you know. That's the point I'm making. Because this is life, you know. It's okay.
I just don't want to take it with me.
That's okay. You're not. By wanting it not all the time.
And start all over again with it.
No, darling, it's not like that.
Tendencies.
The fact that you don't want that and the fact that you are attempting to change it already means you're getting rid of it. So it's really
Oh,
fine.
good, thank you.
Someone else here wanted something to say. Where are you? Yes, my dear. Speak to me.
I have this question. Can depression be like a habit? You know, that your mind just habitually goes in it? Like you talked about the Dalai Lama, that he has compassion, or that he's sad, you know, but he's still happy.
Yes.
And I find myself, as soon as I see something, you know, where I actually have compassion and I'm sad, but I immediately go into depression. You know, and
That's
I feel
right.
really guilty
I
if
understand.
I actually, when in a sad situation, I feel happy.
That's right, exactly. I think that's true. Yeah, I think, okay, first everyone in this room would probably have a different definition of depression, and each of us, I think we could probably define our situations differently. But I think, yeah, they're all habits. They're all habits. They're all things that we see we have a tendency to have, and then when we fall into it, like it started with you after your baby, you know, whatever, they're all habits. All these things are habits, but being kind and being loving is a habit too. So it's a question of, and everything, they're all habits.
But so how can you get yourself, you know, right now I had this situation, you know, I'm taking care of babies.
Yes.
And I had this baby it was born without intestines. So it's basically a death sentence. And I got really, really attached and really sad.
Yes.
But, you know, instead of leaving it there, you know, all of a sudden I mean, I can cry about it, but then I go into depression. You know, I don't go up.
You mean you kind of feel hopeless? And
You know, all of a sudden my
Yes.
whole life becomes
Sure.
in the same way, like very
Sure.
hopeless. And I wish I could just feel the sadness and cry about it, but, you know, not carry it over.
I know, well that's,
you know?
yeah, that's what the job of practice is, you know. Like the woman who was in prison, and again just using as an example, and slowly, she was able to change the way she responded to the situation. So right now, if we see suffering, let's say we see George Bush dropping bombs and we think it's not good, we just say, but it's natural to be angry. We would think it's impossible not to be angry. But the point is, it is possible. That anger is just a certain response, it's a certain way of interpreting. Depression is just a way of interpreting. When it's very deep inside us, especially if it's coming from the past, it can be so entrenched that we can't even see it as conceptual. But finally, if we're able to deconstruct all these emotions, which is what we can do eventually, we're going to be able to see. It's just a bunch of ways of interpreting. Everything, they're all just a bunch of ways of interpreting. But some of them are very deeply entrenched, like I would imagine, like with Joan's depression, you know. Eventually, it is possible to see this and then to slowly change the way we interpret things, change our responses to something. Yeah, definitely, that's the point. That's the point. But at the same time, when it's something very entrenched, it's like having a headache every day. A part of the life is to learn to accept it, and the fact that you put a happy smile on is what changes it. Finally, you are changing it by doing that. You are. You're weakening it. You might notice it now, but you are. So it's possible to change the way we think. That's the point. When you see suffering, it doesn't follow that we need to be depressed. It doesn't follow we need to be angry if we see violence. We can change that. That's the point.
But my
Interpreting
thing is,
it differently.
If I see
If you see what?
If I feel, you know, like really sad about something, I feel guilty of actually going back in my state of happiness.
That is just, again, just a whole approach, and it's just inappropriate. I mean, we all do this. So guilty, but guilt is really just like blame, except it's internalized instead of externalized, you know. And it's meaningless, it's useless, it's not taking responsibility at all, it's not helpful. And this is something interesting. I mean, I remember seeing an interview one time with a bunch of parents whose children had been murdered. Remember all those school killings at some point? And one of the mothers wasn't angry. One of the fathers was out of his brain with anger. You can see he was suffering 10 times more because of it. And the mother, she said that people were shocked that she wasn't angry because they said, that's letting down your child. She said, it's just not how I see it. And often when something bad happens like that, you think it's wrong to give up being angry because it's like, you know, giving up. But it's bizarre, you know. It's just not appropriate to think this. It's so strange. I mean, as if somehow feeling guilty and feeling angry is good. It's not helpful to anybody. And the mother, the one who wasn't angry, she said, she had compassion for the child who killed her child. Whereas the one who's angry wanted him to burn in hell forever, you know. But that doesn't help your child who's dead, and that's the point. So having compassion can help everybody, certainly yourself. So to feel bad about someone else's suffering, to feel bad about having a good situation when someone else doesn't, is just no relationship. There's no relationship. Because if you've got a good situation and you wish, the best way to use it is to use it to help others. How fortunate I am. So you see starving people. You know, okay, the Buddhist you think about karma. Then you think, okay, I'm not starving. Don't feel guilty about that. Think, okay, how can I help others? You use it to help others. Then you're making it constructive.
Thank you.
This person here. Over here, this person. Oh, did you have something to say? Okay. You're stretching. Okay. Here. Yes.
Hello, Venerable Robina. Thank you for your teachings tonight.
A pleasure.
So my question is centers around. So tonight I've heard you mention sort of two different examples of dealing with a problematic situation. One way of dealing with it is to change your mind and to come to accept that the situation is how it is and that there's not much you can do about it. If you
can't. If you can, do it. Please.
So that's my question. What if you're in a situation like this example, you're married to a husband who's really awful or abusive or whatever?
Yes.
I don't know, where's the balance between whether should you try to stay in the situation and change your mind?
Exactly. No, I understand exactly.
Or leave it and go into a different situation. You don't know what the outcome may be.
Exactly, I understand. That's a difficult one, you know, and that comes down to the way the Buddhists would talk, is it comes down to motivation. So finally, the bottom line in Buddhism, they say a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. So the final one is the compassion one, which is the one to benefit others. So if a person's at that level, let's say, in their development, let's say they're at that level of really being an extremely compassionate person, done the work of the wisdom wing, which is the work on yourself, you've become a very extraordinary being, let's say, okay, you're highly developed, then that person would happily stay in that situation because it's amazing practice for them, if you're at that level. Now, if you're not, and you haven't done much work on the wisdom wing and you're full of pain and suffering and low self-esteem and you're brutalized and you're a victim, right? There's no benefit in staying. But that person too, sadly, doesn't have the courage to leave. So you're locked into this victim mode and the tragedy of the victim mode is, you know, it's also self-pity. It's paralysed and hopeless because you've been kind of brutalised, but it's also actually the suppressed rage in there, which is why one day that victim will go and kill the husband. So it's not helpful at all. So the one of taking responsibility is like the one being in prison. Let's say you can't open that door. Let's say you can't leave that husband. It's extremely difficult to change. But if the person can, and learn to have a happy mind with the shitty husband, how amazing. But if you can, you know, it takes courage to actually leave, because most of us, unfortunately, when we're victims, we go back to the husband like a moth to a flame, so we can keep on blaming him, because victims love to blame. And I'm not being cruel about us. We're all victims, you know. Part of the victim mode is we love to blame somebody. So, you know, unfortunately, that's the irony of ego, you know. So it's not an easy one. So as you're really working on your mind, it takes courage to say, see you later, babe, I'm leaving, you know. It's the best thing for him and her. But the trouble is, we don't have that much courage. So what do? We stay stuck, we feel sorry, we're brutalized, we've got no control over ourselves, and we are full of rage at this person. So it's terrible, it's suffering, you know. So we have to have the courage to either totally, you know, like if you're a highly evolved being, you'd be happy to live with a person who's harming you. It sounds bizarre to us because it's all practice, but you're a really amazing person. And otherwise, pick yourself up, have some self-respect, and leave this person. And that takes great courage, doesn't it? Yeah. But if we can be in it and learn from it something about ourselves, like the woman in prison, how amazing. How amazing. And that's what I'm seeing with people in prison. Because you can't change it, because it's so utterly concrete, you either go crazy or you really learn to find resources internally that you didn't think you had. So if we can do this, incredible. Isn't it? Another way to answer, and this in terms of motivation, if you have the two wings of the bird, you would say, from this point of view, there's two reasons ever to do anything. If you're using the wisdom wing as in Buddhist terms, that's the way you work on your own mind, do all the stuff we're discussing here. We haven't really discussed the compassion part at all here. We're discussing working on your own mind. So from that point of view, your motivation would be like this. Will it help what this choice I'm going to make, to stay with that shitty husband or to leave him, whatever it might be, will it help me develop my qualities? And if the answer is yes, you do it. Will it help me develop my qualities? That means develop patience, develop kindness, develop less anger, less jealousy, less depression, less blame, more courage, more self-esteem. If the answer to that is yes, then whatever that thing is, do it. Or if it is, will this actually help me benefit others? Remembering that capacity to benefit others is based on the wisdom wing, then do it. There's only really two reasons, two motives for anything. Do you see my point? Ask yourself that question. On the basis of that, if it won't help you develop your qualities by being in that situation, then you must leave it. You must. But that takes more courage often than a person to sit in a situation and continue to be a victim. Because victims are paralysed, and victims also love to blame. And this is not being cruel about us. We're all like this, you know. It's tragic. So it takes great courage. You know, a friend of mine who was in a relationship, a very intense attachment relationship, and then she discovered he was off having he was sleeping with somebody. She picked up the kids and she left that day. She was hugely attached to him. She left that day. That's incredibly courageous. Most of us would stand around and accuse and fight and argue and be jealous and have mental breakdown, thinking that somehow there's some virtue in that. It's not. It's like drowning in suffering, you know. Yeah, behind you.
I don't really have a question, but can you talk a little bit about shame?
Tell me about shame first.
My perception of shame?
Yes, sure, absolutely.
Feeling bad about past experiences where I may have done harm to others.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, thank you. It's very interesting. You know, there's a certain kind of practice we call purification, which is changing yourself, you know, doing certain practices. And part of it, one of the steps is what we call regret. And then we have what we call guilt. Okay, you will use a third word. But the commonest one I think we have, which we maybe have a general agreement about, is guilt. Oh, I'm a bad person. Dalai Lama was asked one time, what's the difference between this Buddhist approach of regret and the one of guilt? And he said, guilt looks in the past and says, I did this, and I'm a bad person, and I'm bad. It's like self-beating, and it's useless, painful state of mind. So that's useless. Regret looks into the past and says, I did this, and then it says, and now what can I do about it? That's wholesome. That's really a good state of mind. We need to take responsibility for what we did to others. Now, part of the problem, and this is what guilt does, we take responsibility for more than is ours. I remember one time when my mother, you know, we had a typical or not berserk family, right? All sorts of crazy things with my father and everything. And my mother, you know, had 7 children, and she had this crazy family. She had this guilt. As she got older, she was deeply depressed and all this guilt. And I remember her talking about it one time, and I got mad at her because it was like insulting us kids. Like as if she was totally responsible for everything that we ever did. And I said, excuse me, we played a part in this. Back off, you know. You understand my point? She was taking responsibility, and it's like insulting us. So guilt is exaggerates responsibility. So regret is very accurate. I did do that thing. I did badmouth my mother. I did lie to that person. I did kill that dog. Whatever it might be. Or especially if it's with other people. Don't take responsibility for their part. Take responsibility for yours. Yes, I did do that, and have a sense of wholesome shame, wholesome regret. But then think, what can I do about it? So the Buddhist view is you can't change the situation, but you can get rid of the habits and the imprints in your own mind from having done it. And then you can, you know, there's these 4 steps we take. First is regret, which is very wholesome. And the attitude of regret is, I really deeply regret having done this and this and this to harm others. But your reasoning is very interesting. It's because I do not want the suffering of this. I don't want further suffering. Then the second step is you have compassion, which is you don't want them to suffer. The first is like compassion for yourself. Because the Buddhist view of karma is that necessarily everything we say, do and think, positive and negative, leaves a seed in the mind that will necessarily ripen in the future as our experiences, because we're the creators of ourselves, Buddha says. So in that sense, you would want to regret the lying, the killing and the stealing of the past, because that's poisoned you, and it's going to ripen as your future suffering. Excuse me, I don't want more suffering. So it's a really good reason. It's like eating poison. Of course you regret it. My God, I regret that poison, because I don't want the future suffering. So what did I do? Quick, go find a doctor. Do you see my point? That's the attitude of wholesome shame or regret. You own it, but don't just stay stuck in it. How can I change this within me? Because I don't want the future suffering. Because everything you say, do and think leaves seeds in your mind, imprints in your mind, that ripen in the future. Right? So this regret is like compassion for yourself. Then you have compassion for others. Then you do some kind of practice, and then you determine to change. So it's very proactive, you know. Or you determine never to do that again. Very powerful. Because there's no karma. Buddhism would say there's no action, there's no seed in our mind, there's no tendency, there's no karma. We can't change. Nothing is permanent. Things eventually change. There's nothing that's permanent. Okay. Okay. Someone else? Anyone else? Or is that enough? Yes. Yes.
I just wanted to speak to Joan's courage in talking about her situation and her honesty. And I think what you might be deluded about is we're all like that. We're all suffering, and we just don't have the courage or the honesty to admit it, or we have the happy face but just don't realize it's a put on, or we're making it up. I think you're very acute in figuring out what is happening with you and working on it, and you should really, I think, as Robina says, really acknowledge that.
And also, it's like interesting. It's fake it till you make it. Nothing wrong with that. That's practice. When you first decided to ride a bike as a little girl, you were faking it till you made it. You couldn't ride a bike. What a joke to call you a cyclist. But if you'd said, oh my God, I'm just being phony here, I can't ride a bike, you'd never got on again, would you? But you kept faking it till you made it, didn't you? Well, honey, that's practice. So you're faking it till you make it. It'll work. Eventually, the depression will go. This is not a joke. It's kind of interesting. It lightens it, actually, because it's not concrete. It doesn't define you. That's the point. It's something that just came, it's there for a bit, and by you faking it until you make it means it will change. It's just guaranteed. Do you see my point? Yeah. Someone else? That's it enough, maybe. Yes, go for it. Okay. Thanks, Congo.
Well, this is in regards to his question about if you should, about the leaving the husband or wife, I forget what it was. I think you said something along the lines, whatever makes you happy, that's what you have to answer to. But you,
No. I'm not sure if I said that, but go on. Please say your point.
Is this what did you say, or what did you say? You said
no. What I said was, if we look at the choices we want to make, and we ask ourselves, there are really two reasons to do things. I'm saying the first one is, will this choice help me develop my qualities?
Okay, that sounds
help me become a better person.
Okay, and then
that's the point.
Did you also say another question to ask was, will this choice benefit others?
Precisely.
And my question to you is, in your opinion, do you think it would be more important to ask yourself, will this benefit me, lose jealousy, lose anger, or would it be more important to help benefit others?
It depends on where you're at. Like I said before, you know, the Buddhist approach is we've got this potential to develop extraordinary levels of all of this stuff. So we've got the potential on the one hand to lessen anger, jealousy, pride, and therefore to develop love and compassion and wisdom. So the most, you know, we could say a person who's like on grade 12 on this path, that have extraordinarily developed compassion, which implies already they've really worked on their own mind. So that person would even be able to stay in a suffering situation because if it's beneficial for others, even to the detriment of themselves. But a victim could never do that. They wouldn't be a victim. They'd be a very profound person. Are you seeing my point? So we have to know where we're at. We have to know what burden we can carry. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, thank you.
We have to know exactly that. Be very, very practical. Yeah. Like, and there's always an example I use. And a friend of my mother's actually, she was a Catholic. My mum was a Catholic. Sheila Kemp. And Sheila was a really devoted Catholic, really loved God, and she believed God was in everybody. She was incredible. And I love this woman. I mean, I used to always leave our crazy family and go to her family. Well, first she had 6 boys. It was one good reason. And everybody else's dysfunctional family is not like your own, right? So they were a berserk family. I mean, Reg, the husband, was this horrible bloke. Everybody hated Reg, but, you know, he was an old alcoholic and he beat the boys up. But I loved going over to Sheila's house because Sheila had really a sense of humour. She was very funny, you know. And she was really abused by this husband. But it was for her water off a duck's back. Because as far as she was concerned, he was this poor bloke who got drunk and she just loved him and tolerated him like she loved her boys, you know. So she didn't suffer. She didn't suffer. Because she really loved Reg. God was in Reg like God was in everybody. And therefore, because she had this attitude, she was able to live in a lousy situation. But it wasn't lousy for her because she was able to deal with it in a way she saw things. Whereas another person in the same situation, full of victim mentality, being abused and brutalised by this guy, and also having all this rage and anger, that's a disaster. Much better that person leave. I'm just using an example. Are you seeing my point? Mm. We have to know ourselves well, in other words, to make our choices, you know. Maybe that's enough. What do you think? Food for thought? Enough food for thought? Okay, so I'll see some of you again tomorrow, won't I? So we just finished with a wee prayer. This prayer is just, it's on, if you want to read it, it's on here. It's just expressing, very loosely, it's expressing this idea that here we've been sitting for a couple of hours, and the Buddhist view would be that as many thoughts each one of us has had since 7 o'clock, you know, is like a seed we have planted. They're all these, we've planted, in other words, thousands of seeds in our mind, and we delight in this, and we think, great, may these seeds ripen as quickly as possible in the development of our amazing potential for our sake and the sake of other beings. And then the second little prayer is just expressing, may compassion, bodhicitta, as they call it, compassion, grow and grow in the hearts of all. We can just, if you want to join in, we can sing them in Tibetan. Kewadinyu dudag lama sangye drubgyune drowa chikyang malupa dei sala kapasho jang chub sem chogrin poche ma ke panam ke gyuchig ke panyam pa me payang gong ne gong du pelgasho. Okay, thanks everyone very much.